Tony, you alluded to this just a second ago, and obviously take off on anything you want to, but I want to draw back to something that you started on, is the best possible outcome for the Big Ten in terms of maintaining competitive balance with the other conferences would be that their season caves in as well this fall, and then they all have to play in the spring or not until 2021's fall season. But if that doesn't happen and there is a successful college football season played by the other three, you're not predicting any kind of huge decline or drawback for the conference or for Ohio State.
No, I think this is an opportunity for the ACC and the Big 12 to make a move to the number 2 conference. Definitely. Not having Ohio State out there this year would be devastating. Ryan Day said it would be devastating to not play and have everybody else play. And this was a gamble by the Big Ten. Sure, they absolutely think everybody else is going to cancel, or else why do it this early? Ohio State is a giant monster that can it take a year off and pick right back up? The roster probably is not going to be there to do that because you're going to be starting a true freshman quarterback. You're going to have, like I said, it's going to be a freshman-heavy team. So it might be a while before, might be a couple of years before they're back in the playoff hunt. Although if you're just going through the Big Ten, if you're able to beat the Big Ten, then you're still in the playoff hunt. So that's also why I don't know how much they will be negatively impacted. If they will, yes, there's going to be negative impact. Does it drop them down to the level of a Florida State or something like that? I don't think so, because they're still competing against the conference, the Big Ten, and everybody's going to be in that same boat, and Ohio State has more talent than anybody else in the conference. So that will allow them to stay at a certain level. Now, are they playing in the top 4? It just depends on what the voters think. And then they put them in once and they get killed, then they're probably not going to get in the next time for a couple of years. So we'll see. I don't know that it's going to be this thing that sets Ohio State back 5 or 6 years. I remember after the debacle in Glendale, a debacle in the desert against Urban Meyer's Gators, thinking this is going to set Ohio State back 5 years. They're in the game. They were in the championship game the next year. So, we've seen doom and gloom before. Never like this. To not play an entire season is, we don't even know what the impact will be because it's just, we've never seen it before. So any speculation is going to be just guessing at this point. Ohio State is SMU? Like, no, I don't think so, unless everybody leaves. I don't think they're going to leave.
At the time of the Penn State scandal with Sandusky's crime, I thought that was going to set them back considerably, because I was just thinking, okay, they're not an elite program now. They're a top 20 or 25 program. They recruit Pennsylvania, D.C., Maryland, Virginia. Okay. What 4-star is going to want to go? Because I think we kind of forget, or at least I do, the stigma that was on that school just 7 or 8 years ago. So I thought, what big-time player that's also being recruited by Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan State at the time is going to go to Penn State? Why would you go to Penn State and put up with that? You can't go to postseason play, can't win a Big Ten championship, and you're automatically stigmatized. But the NCAA lifted some penalties, some scholarships came back, some postseason play came back, and boom, they're going 7-5, 8-4 like that, and they're back in it.
Why do players go to Miami? Like it still means something to some people. So Ohio State would still mean something to plenty of people, and they would still continue to go there, I think.
Steve, everybody brings up money, and rightfully so, that while this has been speculated about ever since mid-March when it all broke loose and they started taking teams off the court during the basketball season, that the money's going to rule out. There's too much money at stake. They're going to play. And I understand that argument. Well, the MAC decided not to play, and I can understand it. The testing is super expensive, and they're missing all their big-time opponents. For example, Kent State was playing Alabama, Kentucky, and Penn State. It's like $5.5 million that was going to come their way to play those 3 games, plus whatever they draw from concessions and ticket sales, which isn't much. It's mostly TV and those payoffs against the big boys. And then they don't have to deal with all the testing in season. So it makes sense for the MAC to cancel. But for the Big Ten to cancel when the reports are from the latest football season that, and I'm guessing 90% of college football nation would miss this, thinking the SEC brought in the most revenue. No, the Big Ten brought in the most revenue in the most recent football season per team at over $55 million, that you would think if they were siding with money, they'd play.
Yeah, that does just another head scratcher here as to, what the thought process was. Just a little bit of insight about the MidAmerican. I used to do segments quite a bit with the Spectrum Sports outlet here in Ohio. It's now Spectrum News. They kind of gone away from sports, so we don't do the hour-long and half-hour-long shows that we used to do about college football there. And they had a package. They had a game of the week on Spectrum live television for the MAC, and it got taken away from them. They have a contract. I think they do some stuff with CBS Sports Network, and ESPN has some of their games as well. But ESPN came in and gave them some kind of a good deal, I guess, to pull them off of Spectrum and do all the games that aren't on live television are at least webcast on ESPN Plus, probably part of their subscriber system. So I guess I would just say the TV deal that they have is better than the TV deal they had with Spectrum. You could say that. I don't know. Is it $10,000 or is that $200,000? I don't know, but they do have something that they're leaving on the table, whatever it might be. In this case, for the Big Ten, it's just so complicated. I just don't even know what to say. That if 5 of these teams played football, would ESPN and Fox only give them that percentage of the money? I don't, just because the inventory of games would be so much fewer. I mean, they've devalued the Big Ten network by doing this. And that's something that all the schools have a stake in, is the value of that network. They own 49% of it. And I think it brings in a ton of money, obviously. From its fledgling beginning in 2007, it's grown into something wonderful that enriches all these schools very well. And the money is crazy, because Ohio State's athletic budget is roughly $200 million a year. And I think they have over 300 employees, something like that. They have 1,200 student athletes, and they have pledged that they're going to continue all of their scholarship obligations through all of this. So that expenditure right there is heavy, certainly in the many millions. I would put that probably at, now all 1,200 of those students are not on full scholarship, but there is a good number of them that are on full scholarship. If I worked in the Ohio State athletic department and I was not hands-on with an athlete as in doing off-season training or maybe even nutrition, a football assistant coach, the football head coach, the head coach of all the other sports, beyond those people I just listed, they have no need for you right now for the next year. They could furlough you. 200 people could be out of work as a result of this. The only way I think that this works, Ohio State has an endowment, I looked it up on Wikipedia recently, of about $4 billion, give or take, maybe more, I don't know. Some schools have them for many billions of dollars, like Harvard or wherever, but I think it's in the $4 billion range. And again, I'm sure somebody working over there will have a solution to this, but Gene Smith, we've never interviewed him yet to ask him this question, the $200 million question. To me, my solution would be to borrow money from that endowment to underwrite sports for 1 year, $200 million, or $150 million if they do some cutbacks or whatever. And then over a period of 10 to 20 years, you just pay that back to the endowment, and 10 million a year, whatever, till you pay it off, is what would make sense to me. I don't know how they're going to solve it. I don't know who's going to get the furlough. who's going to be just out of a job. I mean, I don't have a program from 1980 here right in front of me where I could hold it up and show you. But if you went to a game in 1980 and got a football program, you would turn to a page that had the athletic department staff. And you had everybody who worked in the athletic department on one page, all their headshots. You had a ticket director, maybe a ticket assistant. You had business manager, you had a controller, you had, couple assistant athletic directors, the athletic director himself, a physician, and that was about it. You didn't have, if you tried to do it now, it'd take up the entire program. You'd have page after page after page after page of headshots. People who work at the arena that has no events, people who work at the stadium that has no events. That's an unintended consequence of this. Some of these people are going to have their salaries cut, put on a furlough. You hope they don't lose their health insurance, their benefits, and everything else. But, there's nothing for a lot of these people to do for the next 8-10 months because there's nothing happening in their realm right now. So that is an unintended consequence of this. I tweeted out and put it in my column. If I was the lacrosse coach at Nebraska or the assistant lacrosse coach at Nebraska, if I was the golf course superintendent at Nebraska, if I was anybody who is not directly hands-on with an athlete and manager of the arena at Nebraska, and I'm out of a job, I'd probably sue the Big Ten because they arbitrarily, in the view of many people, made this decision, and then they wouldn't let Nebraska go play to try and recoup some of that revenue. They would not let Nebraska go play. Think about that. They would not let Nebraska go play to recoup the revenue to pay my salary. Do you think I'd be upset about that? I think that's restraint of trade, in honesty. I mean, in some regard, I'm not a labor lawyer and I'm not a high finance lawyer or whatever, but I think they have opened themselves up to a potential by standing in the way of allowing Nebraska to cover its athletic expenses in this time of need. Because I can't imagine Fox and ESPN are paying them the money for no games this year. I can't. Again, I'm not Darren Ravel. I'm not Rudy Martzke, from USA Today. I love that column in USA Today every Monday after the NFL games. You got to see who flubbed what. All the broadcasts and whatever, the funny comments or whatever, but I can't. Maybe they're paying a holder fee, a 10 mil, a tide over fee or something, but they're not paying the full freight. There's no way.
Well, and it's not just the campuses. I'm thinking like across the street from Ohio State's campus. I read an article or saw a tweet. I don't read articles, obviously. I read tweets. But the Varsity Club, Ohio State bar across the street from Ohio State's campus, makes enough money on a football Saturday to pay their costs for a year.
Yeah.
Which is insane to me. And, props to the amount of drinking that goes on there. But
Tony,
stuff like that is gone too.
Yeah, I'll just throw in. I had a friend who worked, he was a student, and then his last year or two, and even a year or two after he was out of college, he was a bar back or a bartender there in the basement was his area. And, it's wall-to-wall people, upstairs, downstairs, out on the patio. He came out of there one Saturday night, I want to say, with between $1,000 and $1,500 in tips, because the people start drinking at 7 a.m. and they don't stop until midnight. I mean, it is a full day, around the game, whenever it would be. So we have one friend, Tony White, who used to play basketball at Ohio State back in the 80s. He's a successful attorney, and I'm not outing him here on the show, but that is his game day location, is the Varsity Club. And we always had a joke that on one of his key rings, he's got a key where he can open the door and get in there and start making his Jim Beam and Diet Cokes at 6:30 in the morning. So you're right. I mean, if one kid can walk out of there with over $1,000 in tips, think what the owners are making off the sale of all the alcohol.
it's insane because it is wall to wall people, and I don't know how you exist there. I couldn't do it. Mark, my last thought before we go is Ohio State got 1 year out of Justin Fields, 1 year out of Dwayne Haskins, no years out of Joe Burrow, 4 years out of JT Barrett. Good night.
That is dropping
I'm not going to consider that JT
gavel
hate,
right
but
there.
No,
But
it's not. It's just it's a fact.
not hate.
That puts it in perspective right there in regards to looking at, and that is no slight on JT Barrett, very good college quarterback, but there is an obvious talent and ceiling difference between those three players and JT Barrett. Absolutely.